Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Sleep. We love creating unique content for you, but we need your support now more than ever. Our channel is facing some challenges, and we really need your interaction. If you enjoy what we offer, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share our videos with your friends. Every comment, like, and share makes a huge difference. Let's grow together and keep bringing you the content you care about. Thank you for your continued support. The winding highway stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through dense forests and rolling hills. The five friends, Emily, Jake, Lauren, David, and Sarah, were packed into Jake's old SUV, their gear crammed into the trunk, excitement buzzing in the air. The plan was simple: drive out to the secluded campsite, unplug from the world, and spend the weekend hiking, drinking, and stargazing. David fiddled with the radio, trying to find a station that wasn't static. Seriously, Jake, this car's older than my grandfather. Does the radio even work? It works fine, Jake shot back, giving the dashboard a solid thump. You're just bad at tuning it. The others laughed, the sound filling the car as the trees blurred past. They were hours away from civilization, and the road had grown quieter with every passing mile. It was Lauren who spotted the figure first, standing on the shoulder of the road, a lone silhouette in the dusk. "Slow down," she said, leaning forward in her seat. "Is that a hitchhiker?" The figure was hunched under a heavy hoodie, the hood pulled low over their face. They carried a small, tattered bag slung over one shoulder, and walked with an unhurried gait, as if they had all the time in the world. "Creepy," Sarah muttered from the back seat. "Should we stop?" Lauren asked hesitantly. "Hell no," Jake said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "This is how horror movies start." "Oh, come on," Emily chimed in. "It's probably just someone trying to get to town. We can drop them off at the next gas station or something." Against his better judgment, Jake slowed the car and rolled down the window. "Hey, you need a ride?" The hitchhikers stopped and turned to face them, but the hood shadow obscured their features. For a long, awkward moment, they stood motionless before nodding and approaching the car. "Where are you headed?" Jake asked, trying to sound casual. The hitchhiker didn't answer. They simply climbed into the back seat beside Sarah, setting their bag on the floor. The air inside the car seemed to change immediately, growing heavier. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, but no one said anything. The hitchhiker sat rigidly, hands resting on their knees, staring straight ahead. "What's your name?" Sarah finally ventured, her voice uncertain. The hitchhiker didn't respond. "Well, all right then," David muttered under his breath. As the car continued down the highway, the silence became oppressive. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and orange. Emily tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes and playing music from her phone, but the tension refused to dissipate. Finally, they reached the turnoff for the campsite, a narrow dirt road that wound deep into the woods. Jake pulled over to check the map on his phone. When he looked back, the hitchhiker was already climbing out of the car, grabbing their bag without a word. Okay, guess this is your stop," Jake said awkwardly. The hitchhiker didn't look back as they disappeared into the trees. "Seriously, what the hell was that about?" Lauren asked, her voice shaky. No one had an answer. The group tried to shake off the strange encounter as they drove deeper into the woods, but an uneasy feeling lingered, growing stronger as the shadows of the trees closed in around them. The dirt road snaked through the forest, its surface riddled with potholes that made Jake curse under his breath every few minutes. The SUV's headlights illuminated a narrow tunnel of trees, their branches arching overhead like skeletal fingers. The conversation in the car had dwindled to silence, the earlier buzz of excitement replaced with a subtle tension that no one wanted to acknowledge. "Are we sure this place even exists?" David asked, leaning forward to peer out the windshield. "It's on the map," Jake replied, though his tone betrayed a hint of uncertainty. When they finally arrived, the campsite was little more than a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. A fire pit made of stacked stones sat in the center, and a wooden sign nailed to a tree read, "Campers Welcome." "See?" Jake said, forcing cheer into his voice. "Rustic, but it'll do." The group climbed out of the car, stretching stiff limbs and breathing in the crisp evening air. Emily grabbed the cooler while Lauren and David hauled the tents from the trunk. Sarah lingered by the car, her eyes scanning the edge of the forest. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't start," Jake groaned, tossing her a flashlight. "Go help Emily with the firewood." They set up camp quickly, their practiced teamwork honed by years of outdoor trips. By the time the tents were pitched and the fire crackled to life, the sun had vanished completely, leaving the clearing bathed in flickering orange light. For a while, the group settled into a familiar rhythm, cooking hot dogs over the fire, sharing beers, and joking about Jake's terrible driving. The strange hitchhiker was barely mentioned, though their presence still loomed unspoken in the back of everyone's minds. "I'm going to grab some more firewood," David announced, standing and brushing off his hands. "Don't go too far," Lauren warned, her gaze darting to the dark woods. David waved her off with a grin. "Relax, I won't get eaten by a bear." Minutes passed, then more minutes. "He's taking forever," Emily said, frowning. Jake stood, calling out into the night. "David, quit messing around." There was no response. Just as Jake reached for a flashlight, David emerged from the shadows carrying an armful of sticks. "Chill out," he said with a smirk. "I'm fine." "Jerk," Lauren muttered, throwing a marshmallow at him. The tension eased again, and the group returned to their campfire banter. It wasn't until Sarah got up to grab her jacket from the car that she froze in her tracks. "Guys?" she called, her voice trembling. The others turned to look at her. "The hitchhiker," she whispered, pointing to the edge of the clearing. All heads swiveled toward the dark line of trees. At first they saw nothing, then a faint movement, a figure standing just beyond the firelight, partially obscured by the shadows. It was unmistakably the hitchhiker, still clad in their hooded sweatshirt, their face hidden. "I thought they left," Jake said, his voice barely audible. The figure didn't move. It stood completely still, watching. Or at least, that's what it felt like. "Maybe they're lost," Lauren suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. Emily stepped closer to the fire, gripping a flashlight tightly. "Hey," she shouted, "do you need something?" The hitchhiker didn't respond. Instead, they turned and melted into the forest, their silent retreat more unsettling than any answer they could have given. "What the hell?" Sarah breathed. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, the group huddled closer together, their unease growing. Though no one said it out loud, they all wondered the same thing. What was the hitchhiker doing here? The group tried to shake off the unsettling encounter with the hitchhiker. They told themselves it was just a coincidence, that the figure must have wandered back out of curiosity, or maybe to find their own campsite. Yet as the night deepened and the forest grew darker, that explanation felt increasingly hollow. "I'm just saying," Lauren whispered, huddled near the fire. "Why would they come back? And why just stand there?" "Maybe they're harmless," David said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Probably just weird. Not everyone's a serial killer." "Not helping," Emily muttered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Jake threw another log on the fire, the sparks shooting up like fireflies. "We're overthinking it. They're gone. Let's just forget about it and enjoy the trip, okay?" But no one looked convinced. As the hours stretched on, they eventually retired to their tents, though none of them felt particularly eager to sleep. The clearing fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the dying fire and the rustling of the wind through the trees. It was well past midnight when Sarah woke to a sound. At first she thought it was a dream, the faint crunch of leaves, the soft rustling just beyond the thin fabric of the tent. She held her breath, straining to listen. The sound came again, deliberate and slow. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake stirred beside her, groaning softly. "What? Do you hear that?" Jake sat up, rubbing his eyes. The rustling grew louder, more pronounced. It wasn't the wind. From the other tent, Emily's voice called out, "Guys, is someone walking around out there?" The group froze. "No one's outside," Jake said, trying to sound confident but failing. "Well, something is," Emily shot back. Jake unzipped the tent cautiously. The zippers sound harsh in the silence. He stuck his head out, holding a flashlight, and swept the beam across the clearing. "Nothing," he said after a moment. "Probably just an animal." "An animal doesn't walk like that," Sarah whispered. They sat in tense silence, waiting for the sounds to stop. Instead, they grew louder, circling the campsite. Lauren suddenly yelped. "I saw something." "What?" Jake hissed, his heart pounding. "There, near the trees," Lauren said, her voice shaking. Jake turned the flashlight toward the edge of the clearing. For a moment the light revealed only trees and shadows. Then, just at the edge of the beam, a figure stood. It was the hitchhiker. They were still motionless, the hood obscuring their face. "Hey," Jake shouted, his fear boiling over into anger. "What the hell do you want?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it stepped backward, disappearing into the darkness like smoke. The group sat frozen, too terrified to move. Finally, Jake whispered, "We're leaving first thing in the morning." None of them slept that night, the rustling sounds continuing intermittently until dawn. Morning brought little comfort. The rising sun painted the clearing in soft hues of gold, but the warmth felt hollow. The group emerged from their tents, groggy and on edge, their faces pale from a night without rest. The forest around them was eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. "We're leaving," Jake announced, his voice firm. He grabbed the car keys from his bag and pointed at David. "Help me pack up the tents." "No arguments here," Lauren muttered, already stuffing her sleeping bag into its sack. As the group hurried to dismantle their camp, Emily froze. "Wait, where's the cooler?" Everyone stopped and looked around. The cooler, which had been next to the fire pit the night before, was gone. "Maybe an animal dragged it off," Sarah suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "Great," Jake muttered. "Add that to the list of weird crap that happened." They searched for the cooler briefly, but found no trace of it. Frustrated, they returned to packing. But just as they were finishing, Lauren stopped mid-step, her eyes locked on the forest. "What is it?" David asked, following her gaze. "There," Lauren whispered, her voice trembling. "Near the tree line." They all turned, their eyes scanning the dense woods. At first they saw nothing. Then, like a trick of the light, the hitchhiker appeared, standing among the trees. "Are you kidding me?" Jake hissed, his pulse spiking. The hitchhiker stood perfectly still, their hood pulled low as always. But now, in the daylight, something was off. Their stance was unnaturally rigid, their arms hanging at odd angles. "Just stay here," Jake said, grabbing a flashlight despite the daylight. "Don't," Emily warned, her voice tight with fear. Ignoring her, Jake stepped forward, his flashlight clutched like a weapon. "Hey, I'm talking to you. What's your problem?" The hitchhiker didn't respond. Jake moved closer, the others whispering frantic protests behind him. When he was only a few feet away, he stopped. "Show me your face," he demanded, his voice shaking. Slowly, the hitchhiker raised their head. Jake froze, his breath catching in his throat. The face beneath the hood wasn't a face at all. It was a smooth, featureless expanse of pale skin, devoid of eyes, a nose, or a mouth. The hitchhiker tilted their head slightly, as if studying Jake, though there were no eyes to see with. "What the—" Jake stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The others screamed as the hitchhiker began to move, not walking, but gliding forward silently. Jake scrambled back toward the group, and they all retreated to the center of the clearing, staring in horror as the faceless figure stopped just at the edge of the campsite. "Stay back," David shouted, waving a tent pole. The hitchhiker didn't move. It simply stood there, its blank face angled toward them. Then, without warning, it turned and vanished into the woods, as silent and unnerving as ever. "What the hell is that thing?" Lauren whispered, her hands trembling. No one had an answer. The group sat huddled around the fire pit, the half-packed tents and scattered gear forgotten. Jake gripped the flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white, his mind replaying the faceless visage over and over. "That wasn't human," Sarah said finally, breaking the tense silence. Her voice wavered, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "No kidding," Jake muttered. "What do we do?" Lauren asked, glancing nervously at the woods. "We can't just stay here." "We leave," Jake said firmly. "Right now." "Leave?" Emily snapped, her voice rising in panic. "You saw it. It's still out there." "That's exactly why we leave," Jake shot back. "We'll take the main road and head back to town. We'll call the cops, the park rangers, whoever." David frowned. "But what if it follows us? What if—" A sound cut him off, freezing everyone in place. It was Emily's voice calling from the trees. "Guys? Where are you?" Emily paled, her eyes wide with terror. "What the—" The voice came again, identical to hers but distant. echoing through the woods. "Guys? Hello? I'm lost!" "That's not me," Emily whispered, trembling. "Stay together," Jake ordered, stepping closer to the fire. Then came another voice, this time David's, shouting from the opposite direction. "Over here, I found something." David looked horrified, shaking his head. "I didn't say that, I didn't." The group clung to one another as more voices began to emerge from the forest, all eerily familiar. Lauren's voice cried for help, Jake's voice barked commands, Sarah's voice sobbed in fear. "There are voices," Sarah whispered. "It's trying to split us up," Jake realized, his heart pounding. "No one leaves the campsite, do you hear me? No one." The voices grew louder, overlapping until they were a chaotic cacophony surrounding the group. The fire flickered and crackled as if in protest, the shadows around them seeming to shift and stretch. "Over here," one of the voices called. "Help me!" screamed another. Emily clutched her head, rocking back and forth. "Make it stop! Please, make it stop!" "Shut up!" Jake yelled at the forest, his voice breaking. "We're not going anywhere." Suddenly, the voices stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, oppressive. The group glanced around nervously, the only sound their labored breathing. Then came the rustling, slow, deliberate, circling the campsite once again. "Stay close," Jake whispered, holding the flashlight steady. From the darkness, the hitchhiker appeared. This time, it stepped closer, just beyond the firelight, its faceless head tilting as if amused. "What do you want?" Lauren screamed, her voice raw with terror. The hitchhiker didn't answer. Instead, it opened its arms wide, as though inviting them closer. "Run," Sarah whispered. But no one moved. The hitchhiker raised one hand and pointed toward the forest. From the darkness, they heard Jake's voice again, calm and commanding. "Come on, guys, it's safe now." The hitchhiker stood at the edge of the firelight, its faceless head tilted in silent mockery. Jake stared at it, heart hammering, as his own voice echoed from the forest again. "Come on, guys, this way, trust me." That's my voice," Jake stammered, his face pale. "It's trying to mess with us," David said, his grip tightening on the tent pole he held as a makeshift weapon. "Don't listen to it." The hitchhiker's featureless face shifted slightly, like it was observing them, learning. Without warning, it stepped backward into the shadows and disappeared. The group stood frozen, the only sound the crackling fire. "What do we do now?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "We stick together," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We don't split up no matter what." But the tension among them was palpable. Everyone's eyes darted nervously to the forest, expecting the hitchhiker to reappear at any moment. The fire, their only comfort, was starting to burn low. "Someone needs to grab more wood," Jake said reluctantly. "No way," Sarah said sharply. "I'm not going out there." "I'll go," David offered, trying to sound brave. "I'll just stay close to the edge of the campsite." Jake hesitated but nodded. "Be quick." David stepped into the dark, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the trees. The remaining four huddled closer to the fire, every crackle of a branch making them flinch. Minutes passed, too many minutes. "Where is he?" Lauren whispered. Jake stood and called out, "David, you good?" No response. "David," Jake yelled again, panic rising in his chest. Suddenly footsteps approached and David emerged from the trees, carrying a bundle of sticks. "Relax," he said with a grin. "I'm fine." But something was off. "David?" Lauren asked hesitantly. "Yeah," he replied, dropping the wood by the fire. "Why didn't you answer Jake when he called?" David frowned, his expression almost confused. "I didn't hear him." "You were gone too long," Emily said, stepping back. "It doesn't take that long to grab firewood." "Are you guys serious right now?" David asked, his voice rising. "You think I'm what? Not me?" The group exchanged uneasy glances. "I don't like this," Sarah whispered, clutching Jake's arm. "Look," David said, raising his hands. "I'm fine. I'm me, okay? Stop being paranoid." But there was something off about his voice. It was flat, lacking the familiar warmth and energy. "Prove it," Jake demanded, his flashlight aimed at David. "Tell us something only you would know." David scowled. "You're being ridiculous." "Just answer," Lauren said. David hesitated, then he smiled, a strange, hollow smile. "I don't have to prove anything." Jake stepped back, his blood running cold. "Stay away from us," he warned, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. David's face twitched, and for a fleeting moment, his expression seemed to falter. as if something beneath the surface was struggling to hold its shape. "Fine," he said, his tone cold and unfamiliar. "Suit yourselves." He turned and walked toward the edge of the campsite, disappearing into the darkness without another word. "What do we do?" Emily asked, her voice breaking. Jake swallowed hard, his mind racing. "I don't think that was David." The group sat in stunned silence, their breaths shallow as they stared at the dark tree line where David had vanished. The fire cast long shadows across their faces, emphasizing the fear etched into every expression. "That wasn't David," Emily said finally, her voice trembling. "We don't know that for sure," Lauren whispered, though her tone betrayed her own doubt. Jake shook his head. "No. The way he smiled, the way he acted, that wasn't him." "Then where is he?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No one had an answer. Jake stood abruptly. "We're not waiting around to find out. We're leaving. Now." The group scrambled to gather their remaining gear, though their hands shook and their movements were clumsy. Every moment spent exposed in the open felt unbearable, as if the forest itself was watching. When they reached the car, Jake fumbled with the keys, his fingers slick with sweat. "Come on," he muttered, shoving the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered but didn't start. No, Jake whispered, turning the key again. The car made a grinding noise, but the engine refused to catch. "Jake," Emily said, her voice rising in panic. "I'm trying," he snapped, twisting the key repeatedly. Suddenly Sarah gasped. "The tires, they're slashed." The group piled out of the car to check. Sure enough, all 4 tires had deep gashes, the rubber shredded. "This thing doesn't want us to leave," Lauren whispered, her eyes darting around the clearing. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. Jake clenched his fists, his mind racing. "We'll go on foot. Follow the road back to the highway." "But it's miles," Sarah protested. "We don't have a choice," Jake said firmly. The group grabbed what supplies they could carry, Jake taking the lead with the flashlight. The road stretched ahead like a dark tunnel, the towering trees blocking out the moonlight. They walked in tense silence, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Every so often, one of them would glance nervously over their shoulder, as if expecting to see the hitchhiker gliding after them. After what felt like an eternity, Emily stopped abruptly. "Did you hear that?" The group froze, their ears straining. There it was, a faint rustling from the woods growing louder, closer. "Keep moving," Jake urged, his voice tight. But the rustling didn't stop. It followed them, the sound circling just out of sight. "Run," Lauren whispered, her voice trembling. They broke into a sprint, their breathing ragged as they fled down the road. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, casting erratic shadows. Suddenly a figure stepped onto the road ahead, stopping them in their tracks. It was David. "Wait," he called, his voice desperate. "It's me. Don't leave me." "Is it really him?" Lauren asked, her voice trembling. Jake hesitated, his heart pounding. "I don't know." David stepped closer, his face illuminated by the flashlight. "Please," he begged, "you have to help me." But something was wrong. His eyes lacked their usual warmth. His movements were stiff, almost mechanical. "That's not David," Jake whispered. David's face twitched, his mouth curling into that same strange, hollow smile. "You're right," he said, his voice shifting, becoming distorted, layered with tones that didn't belong to him. The figure lunged, and the group scattered, their screams piercing the still night air. Jake swung the flashlight instinctively, the beam bouncing off the featureless figure now standing where David had been moments before. "Run!" Jake shouted, his voice raw with panic. The group sprinted into the woods, their feet crunching over leaves and snapping twigs. The darkness was oppressive, and the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches clawing at their faces and clothing. Behind them, the hitchhiker gave chase, its movements eerily silent. "This way!" Jake called, weaving through the trees. Emily stumbled, falling hard onto the ground. Sarah stopped to help her, but as she turned, she froze. Standing just a few feet away was the hitchhiker, its smooth, blank face tilting as if observing her. "Move!" Sarah screamed, yanking Emily to her feet. The two took off running again, the hitchhiker gliding effortlessly after them. When they finally regrouped, huddling behind a large fallen tree, Jake was frantically checking their surroundings with the flashlight. "Is everyone here?" he asked, panting. "Lauren?" Emily asked, looking around. "Where's Lauren?" Jake demanded. They all fell silent, their eyes scanning the darkness. "Lauren!" Jake shouted. From somewhere deep in the woods, her voice called back, "I'm over here, I'm fine." "Don't," Sarah whispered urgently, grabbing Jake's arm. "Don't go to her, it's not her." Jake hesitated, his heart pounding. "Help!" Lauren's voice screamed again, this time more desperate. "We can't leave her," Emily pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Stay here," Jake said, his jaw tight. "I'll check. If it's really her, I'll bring her back." "Jake, no," Sarah begged, but he was already moving, flashlight in hand. As Jake crept through the trees, the sound of Lauren's voice grew louder. "Jake, hurry, please!" He followed the voice to a small clearing. Lauren stood there, her back to him, her shoulders trembling. "Lauren," Jake called softly. She turned slowly, and Jake felt his stomach drop. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and empty. "Jake," she said, but her voice was off, flat, mechanical, like a recording. "Lauren," he whispered again, stepping back. Her face began to shift, melting away like wax. In its place was the blank, featureless slate of the hitchhiker. Jake stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root. Behind him, Emily screamed. He whipped around to see the others running toward him, the hitchhiker gliding silently after them. "It's taking her!" Emily shouted, pointing behind Jake. Jake turned back to see the real Lauren, her face contorted in silent terror as she was dragged into the darkness by an unseen force. "No!" Jake shouted, running toward her. But by the time he reached the spot, she was gone. The forest seemed to close in around them, a suffocating maze of shadows and unseen threats. Jake stood frozen where Lauren had been dragged away, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "She's gone," Sarah whispered, her voice hollow. "No," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "We'll find her. We have to." "She's already dead," Emily said, tears streaking her face. "You saw what it did to her." "We can't give up," Jake said, his voice wavering. "We need to stop it." "Stop it?" David scoffed. "How the hell are we supposed to stop that thing? It's not even human." Before Jake could answer, the rustling began again, circling them like a predator toying with its prey. The hitchhiker's figure appeared just beyond the tree line, its faceless head angled toward them. "Stay together," Jake said, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The hitchhiker stepped forward, gliding silently into the clearing. As it moved, its body began to shift, stretching and twisting. Its smooth, blank face warped, features emerging like ripples in water. The group gasped as the hitchhiker's face became Lauren's. "Jake," it said in her voice, the tone eerily perfect. "Help me, please." Jake's stomach churned, but he forced himself to speak. "You're not her." The hitchhiker tilted its head, the mockery of Lauren's face contorting into a hollow smile. "Are you sure?" it asked, its voice layered with others. Emily's, Sarah's, even Jake's. "It's stealing us," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "Piece by piece." The hitchhiker took another step closer, its form shifting again. Now it wore Jake's face, his voice echoing through the clearing. "You can't stop me. You'll all be mine soon." "Run!" Jake said, his voice firm despite the fear gripping him. "Now!" The group bolted, scattering through the trees. The hitchhiker didn't chase them immediately. Instead, its voice called out from all directions, mimicking their cries for help. Jake led Sarah and Emily deeper into the woods, desperate to lose the creature. They stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, its windows broken and the door hanging off its hinges. "In here," Jake whispered, ushering the others inside. The cabin was small and damp, filled with the smell of rotting wood. Jake barricaded the door with an old table, his hands shaking. "What now?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "We make a stand," Jake said, grabbing a broken chair leg as a makeshift weapon. "It wants us to split up. We stay together. We fight." Emily sobbed quietly in the corner, her face buried in her hands. "I don't want to die like this." Jake knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You won't, I promise." The sound of footsteps echoed outside, slow and deliberate. "It's here," Sarah whispered. The footsteps stopped, replaced by the sound of Jake's own voice calling out from the other side of the door. "Guys, it's safe now. Open up." "Don't listen," Jake said through clenched teeth. The voice grew louder, more insistent. Then the door creaked, the table scraping against the floor as it was pushed inward. The hitchhiker stood in the doorway, its face shifting rapidly through their features. It stepped inside, its blank form filling the small space. Jake charged, swinging the chair leg with all of his strength. The wood connected, but the hitchhiker didn't flinch. Instead, it grabbed Jake by the wrist, its grip icy and inhumanly strong. "Mine," it whispered, its voice a haunting chorus of their own. Jake struggled against the hitchhiker's grip, his arm burning with cold as if his very life was being drained away. The creature's shifting face loomed close to his, a terrifying kaleidoscope of features. Lauren's terrified expression, Sarah's pleading eyes, David's grim determination, all melted into one. "Get off him!" Sarah screamed, slamming a heavy plank into the hitchhiker's back. The creature didn't react. It tightened its grip on Jake, pulling him closer. Emily lunged forward with a rusty nail she'd found on the cabin floor, driving it into the hitchhiker's side. A low, unnatural hiss escaped its blank form, and it released Jake, staggering backward. "Go!" Jake shouted, clutching his wrist and pushing Sarah and Emily toward the door. The three of them bolted into the woods, leaving the cabin and the creature behind. The hitchhiker didn't follow immediately, but its voices echoed through the trees, each one perfectly mimicking their own. "This way," Jake urged, leading them through the dense underbrush. Branches tore at their clothes and skin, but they didn't stop. The forest felt endless, the darkness oppressive, but they pressed on, desperate to escape. Finally, they stumbled onto the dirt road where their car sat lifeless. Jake stopped, panting heavily, his flashlight beam trembling as it scanned the surroundings. "We'll follow the road," he said. "It has to lead somewhere." But as they turned to start walking, the hitchhiker stepped onto the road ahead of them. Its form had grown taller, more monstrous, its blank face stretched unnaturally wide. "You can't run," it said, its voice now a perfect chorus of all five of them. Jake grabbed a fallen branch and held it like a bat. "Stay behind me," he told the others. The hitchhiker advanced slowly, its footsteps deliberate. Jake swung the branch with all his strength, but the creature caught it mid-swing, snapping it in half as if it were a twig. "Run!" Jake yelled again, throwing himself at the hitchhiker in a desperate attempt to buy time. Sarah and Emily hesitated for a heartbeat, tears streaming down their faces, before turning and sprinting down the road. Jake struggled against the creature, its cold, smooth hands pressing against his face. He felt his strength fading, his thoughts scattering like leaves in the wind. "You'll be like me," the hitchhiker whispered, its voice an empty void. Sarah and Emily didn't stop running until they saw headlights in the distance. A truck rumbled toward them, and they waved frantically, collapsing onto the road as it came to a screeching halt. The driver, a gruff man with a kind face, helped them into the cab, his questions met with incoherent sobs. "What about your friend?" he asked as he turned the truck around. Sarah looked back at the road, her face pale. "He's gone," she whispered. As the truck sped away, Emily glanced into the side mirror. For a moment she thought she saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, watching them. But when she blinked, it was gone. Days later, authorities found the abandoned campsite and the destroyed cabin, but no trace of Jake, Lauren, or David. Months passed, and Sarah and Emily tried to move on, but the fear lingered, a constant shadow in their lives. One evening, as Sarah sat in her apartment, her phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. It was from Jake. "Hey, it's safe now. You can come back." Her blood ran cold as she stared at the message, her reflection in the screen twisting into something blank, smooth and featureless. Hey everyone, so this is going to sound really weird, but I need to share what happened to me last week. It all started when I was messing around online late at night. You know, just one of those nights when you can't sleep, and you end up diving into random parts of the internet. Well, I ended up on the dark web. I always heard crazy stories about it, illegal stuff, really messed up things. But I was curious. I figured, what's the harm in just looking around? I was clicking through different forums. Most of it was boring or just plain weird. But then I found this link. The title was in some language I didn't recognize, but I clicked on it anyway. The page that came up was super simple. Black background, white text. The headline read, "Confidential, asteroid collision imminent, 7 days until impact." I swear my heart stopped for a second. I mean, this had to be a joke, right? But I kept reading. The article talked about an asteroid called Apophis X that was on a direct path to hit Earth. It said it was half the size of the one that killed the dinosaurs. The person who wrote it claimed to be a scientist from some secret observatory, and they included all these details: coordinates, speed, impact time. There were even photos of the asteroid and graphs showing its path. It all looked so real. The last part of the article really freaked me out. The government knows. They have known for weeks. There will be no warning, no evacuation. Prepare as best you can. Good luck. I didn't know what to think. It was too detailed to be a prank, but it was just so unbelievable. I started looking for any news about it, but there was nothing. No one was talking about this asteroid. Everything seemed totally normal, but that just made me more paranoid. What if it was true and no one was saying anything? I posted about it on a couple of astronomy forums I visit sometimes, hoping someone would know more. Most people said it was fake, just a joke or a scare tactic. Some were pretty mean about it, saying I was stupid for believing it. But a few people said they'd check it out, which gave me some hope. I couldn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured this giant rock smashing into Earth. I kept checking the article, expecting it to be taken down, but it was still there. The whole thing just felt so real. I called an old friend of mine who works at a small observatory. He finally got back to me and said they'd seen some strange readings but didn't know what it was yet. He said it could be a new asteroid, but they weren't sure. That freaked me out even more. If there was even a chance this was real, I needed to know. Over the next few days, I noticed people acting weird. Maybe it was just in my head, but everything seemed a bit off. The streets were a little quieter, and people seemed kind of tense. I kept thinking about that article, about how the government might know but wasn't saying anything. I felt like I was living in a bad dream. I spent every free moment diving deeper into the dark web, trying to find more information. I found other posts talking about government cover-ups and secret bunkers. People were saying the rich and powerful were preparing for the end while the rest of us were left in the dark. It was hard to know what to believe. So here I am, with 6 days left, according to that article. I don't know if it's real or not, but I can't just ignore it. I need to get ready, tell my family, figure out what to do. It feels like I'm running out of time, and I don't even know if there's anything I can do to stop it. But I'll keep you all updated as I find out more. So it's been a day since I found that weird article. I've been obsessing over it, trying to find any mention of this asteroid, Apophis X, in the news. But there's nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. It's bizarre. How can something that big be happening and no one is talking about it? I started thinking maybe the media is hiding it from us. I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. The article said the government knew about the asteroid and wasn't telling anyone. What if they've also told the media to keep quiet? If people found out an asteroid was going to hit in less than a week, there'd be mass panic. Maybe they're trying to avoid that. I checked all the big news websites, local news, international news, everything. Same result. Nothing about an asteroid. But I noticed something odd. There were lots of stories about random things like celebrity gossip and feel-good stories. It felt like they were trying to keep us distracted. I decided to ask a friend of mine who works in journalism. She's usually pretty open about stuff, but this time she brushed me off. She said there were always crazy conspiracy theories, and the media couldn't report on things that weren't verified. But I could tell she was nervous, like she wanted to say more, but couldn't. I also looked at some of the alternative news sites, the ones that usually talk about government cover-ups and stuff. Even they didn't have anything solid, just vague hints and theories. It was really frustrating. It made me feel even more isolated. Then something weird happened while I was watching the news. There was a segment about space exploration, and for a split second, the screen glitched. It looked like a news ticker at the bottom showed something about an asteroid, but it was gone so fast I couldn't be sure. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but it felt real. I started noticing other strange things too. Social media posts about strange sightings in the sky would disappear quickly. Accounts talking about space anomalies would get suspended. It felt like someone was trying really hard to keep any potential information hidden. This just made me more paranoid. In the meantime, I tried to figure out how to prepare. I told my family and close friends about what I found. Most of them thought I was overreacting, but a few agreed to keep an eye out for any news. We started talking about what we would do if it turned out to be true. It felt surreal, planning for the end of the world while everyone else was just going about their normal lives. I felt stuck between two realities, one where everything was fine, and another where an asteroid was about to destroy us all. The lack of information was the worst part, not knowing if I was the only one who knew, or if others were just as scared and hiding it well. The days were ticking by and I was running out of time. As I write this, I have 5 days left. I'm going to keep searching for answers, keep preparing, and keep hoping that somehow this is all a mistake. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that something terrible is coming, and that we're all being kept in the dark. So after a couple of days freaking out and not finding anything on regular news sites, I went back to the dark web. I needed to know more about this asteroid, Apophis X. That article I found was still bothering me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I found the same forum and a new thread with even more details. This time it was intense. There were a bunch of professional-looking documents, charts, and pictures. Honestly, a lot of it went over my head because I'm not a scientist, but it all looked legit. The technical stuff was too complex for some random person to make up. They had high-resolution pictures of the asteroid from telescopes, showing its surface and craters. There were graphs showing the asteroid's path and how it was on a direct course to hit Earth. The numbers and diagrams were overwhelming, but they all pointed to the same thing: impact in a few days. There were also reports from supposed experts who claimed to be from various space agencies. They talked about the asteroid's speed, size, and the damage it would cause. Reading these made my stomach knot up. It didn't seem like something someone could fake easily. The details were too specific and precise. One document even showed emails between scientists and government officials. They were trying to come up with a plan, but it was clear they thought it was too late to do anything major. They were discussing ways to keep the public calm and avoid mass panic. The pictures were the most convincing part. They showed the asteroid getting closer and closer in different stages. There were even images comparing it to other known asteroids, showing how massive it was. It was terrifying. Seeing all this made it feel real. It was hard to believe someone would go to such lengths to create a hoax. The level of detail and professionalism in the documents and pictures convinced me that something real was going on. I saved everything I could, took screenshots, and downloaded the documents. I needed to show these to my family and friends to make them understand this wasn't just some crazy conspiracy theory. We needed to be ready for whatever was coming. I shared the information with a few close friends online. Their reactions were mixed. Some were scared, and others thought it was an elaborate prank. But the more I looked at the evidence, the more I was sure this was real. With only 4 days left, I felt a growing sense of urgency. I didn't know what else to do but keep preparing and trying to get others to see what I saw. I kept checking back on the dark web for updates, hoping for new information or maybe even a solution, but all I found were more confirmations of the impending impact. So with all the info I found on the dark web about Apophis X, I figured I needed to tell people. If this asteroid was really coming, everyone had the right to know. I decided to post everything I found on social media. I included the pictures, documents, graphs, and everything else. I made a detailed post and hit share. At first, a few friends liked it and commented, mostly in shock. But then, about an hour later, my post was gone, just disappeared. I thought maybe I'd deleted it by mistake, so I posted it again. This time it was taken down in minutes, and I got a notification saying my post violated community guidelines. This scared me. I wasn't posting anything offensive or fake news, just what I believed was important info. Why would they take it down? It felt like someone didn't want this information getting out. I tried posting on a few other social media sites, but the same thing happened. Each post got deleted almost immediately. I decided to message a few friends directly with the information. Some had seen my post before it got taken down and were already spooked. They started asking more questions and seemed genuinely worried. But still, most people thought it was just some elaborate joke or conspiracy theory. I also tried joining some discussion groups and forums online to share what I found. But even there, my posts were either ignored or deleted. It was frustrating. The more I tried to share, the more it felt like someone or something was stopping me. One friend suggested I reach out to a journalist who covers space and science. I sent them all the details, hoping they might take it seriously and investigate. But I never heard back. It felt like everyone was either too scared to touch the story or convinced it wasn't real. This whole experience made me feel even more paranoid. If social media and news outlets were silencing this, maybe the government really was trying to keep it quiet. The fact that my posts kept getting taken down made it all feel more real and urgent. With only 3 days left, I felt like I was running out of options. I didn't know how else to get the word out. I kept preparing, talking to my family and close friends and hoping that somehow this wasn't true. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, and we were all being kept in the dark. Alright, so now it's down to the last 2 days. I've done everything I can to warn people, but it feels like it's all been dismissed as just another conspiracy theory. Everyone I talked to either brushed it off or got scared for a bit, but then went back to their normal lives. The few friends who did believe me have been checking in, but we're all feeling pretty helpless. There's only so much you can do when the world around you is just carrying on like normal. No one else seems to be taking this seriously, and there's nothing official to back up my claims. It's frustrating, but I get it. There's so much fake stuff out there that it's hard to know what's real anymore. I keep thinking, maybe this is just a huge misunderstanding or an elaborate prank. Maybe I fell for something that wasn't real. I hope that's all it is. I really do. But at this point, all I can do is wait and see. I've made my preparations as best I can, but who knows if it's even necessary. These last days have been a roller coaster of emotions. One moment, I'm convinced it's real and that we're all doomed. The next, I think maybe I'm just overreacting and got sucked into a big online hoax. It's exhausting, and I'm just ready for this to be over one way or another. So here we are, just waiting. Maybe in a couple of days I'll look back on this and laugh about how paranoid I got. Or maybe things will take a turn and everything will change. I don't know. We just have to wait and see. I hope it's nothing, but at least I did what I could. Now it's just a matter of time. All right, Reddit. Maybe someone here can tell me I'm not crazy. It started innocently enough, as these things usually do. I'm a bit of a night owl, and on weekends I like to dive into the weird corners of the internet. Urban legends, conspiracy theories, that sort of thing. It's all just entertainment to me, or at least it was. One night, around 2 a.m., I found myself on a forum I hadn't seen before. The site looked old, like it hadn't been updated in a decade. The posts were a mishmash of the usual conspiracy fodder: aliens, government cover-ups, secret societies. But one thread caught my eye. Project Tempest, the government's time travel experiments. I clicked on it out of curiosity. The first post was a wall of text detailing a supposed government project from the 1960s. It claimed that scientists had discovered a way to manipulate time. They called it Project Tempest. The post was filled with jargon and technical details that I couldn't begin to understand, but one thing stood out. They said the project was still active. The thread was filled with replies, some calling it out as BS, others sharing their own evidence. One user, who went by the handle Flex20, stood out. His posts were detailed, referencing documents and events that seemed to line up in a disturbing way. He claimed to have worked on the project, but his posts were cryptic, filled with warnings about the dangers of knowing too much. By the time I finished reading the thread, it was nearly 4 a.m. I decided to call it a night, but something about it stuck with me. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Project Tempest. I started doing my own research, finding obscure references in old books and academic papers. It was like the more I looked, the more convinced I became that there was something to it. One night, as I was digging deeper, I decided to take a risky step. Flex20 had mentioned the dark web, hinting that the real information was hidden there. I knew the dark web was dangerous, filled with illegal and disturbing content. But my curiosity got the better of me. I set up Tor and accessed the link provided in the thread. The site was bare bones, just a black background with a single line of text. "Welcome to the truth." I clicked on the link and was taken to a page filled with files. Most were just text documents, but some were videos and images. The file names were cryptic, like Project Tempest 1965 and Experiment Results 1972. I started with the documents. They were reports, filled with technical jargon but also with enough plain language to be terrifying. They described experiments on people, attempts to send them forward and backward in time. Most of the subjects didn't survive, and those who did were changed. The videos were worse. Grainy black and white footage showed people strapped to tables, electrodes attached to their heads. The scientists talked about time dilation, temporal displacement, and other concepts that seemed straight out of science fiction. But the looks on the faces of the subjects were real, filled with pain and terror. One video in particular stood out. It was labeled Subject 23. The timestamp indicated it was from 1983. The subject was a young man, probably in his 20s. As the experiment began, he started to scream, a high-pitched wail that didn't seem possible for a human to make. The footage became distorted, and for a moment it looked like he was glitching, like a broken video game character. When it was over, the man was gone, just vanished. I sat back, my heart pounding. This was insane. There was no way it could be real. But the more I watched, the more convinced I became. There was something here, something horrifying. I needed to know more, but I was also terrified of what I might find. I logged off the dark web and shut down my computer. As I sat in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was venturing into dangerous territory. That night I barely slept, haunted by the images I had seen and the implications of what I had discovered. The next day I tried to go about my routine, but my mind kept drifting back to Project Tempest. I had a feeling this was just the beginning, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what was coming next. Alright Reddit, I'm back with more updates. After my initial dive into the dark web and the disturbing files I uncovered about Project Tempest, I found myself obsessed with the idea of a real, functioning wormhole. The documents kept referring to something they called the Gateway, supposedly a wormhole discovered in an abandoned gold mine. According to these files, if you wanted to time travel, you needed this wormhole. The problem was, they never mentioned exactly where it was. Determined to find out more, I plunged back into the dark web. Navigating those hidden corners of the internet felt like walking through a minefield. I sifted through countless dead links and cryptic forums, looking for any mention of the gateway's coordinates. One night, after hours of searching, I stumbled across a hidden forum thread. It was buried deep within a site that looked like it hadn't been updated in years. The thread was titled Coordinates to the Gateway. My heart raced as I clicked on it. The thread was filled with cryptic messages and fragments of information. It was clear that others had been searching for the same thing. One user, named Flex20, had posted extensively about the wormhole. His posts were detailed, referencing old maps, abandoned mines, and strange geological formations. He claimed to have seen the wormhole himself, but never disclosed its exact location. Flex 20's post led me to another layer of information. He had uploaded several files, each one more cryptic than the last. They were a mix of old mining maps, geological surveys, and encoded messages. I spent hours decoding them, piecing together bits of information that seemed to point towards a location in Nevada. The files hinted at an old mining area called Gold Dust Creek. It had been abandoned for decades, and according to Flex 20, it was where the gateway was hidden. But there were no precise coordinates, just vague references and descriptions. Determined to find it, I decided to reach out to Flex 20 directly. I sent him a private message through the forum, asking for more details. Days went by without a response, and I started to lose hope. Then, one night, I received a reply. It was brief, just a single line. "Keep looking at the maps. You're closer than you think." Taking his advice to heart, I pored over the maps again. This time I noticed something I had missed before, a series of faint markings around Gold Dust Creek. They seemed to form a pattern, almost like a trail leading deeper into the mining area. Armed with this new clue, I focused my search on old mining records and geological reports from the area. I found references to a series of unexplored tunnels, places where the miners had reported strange phenomena, lights, sounds, and sudden temperature drops. The descriptions matched the kind of disturbances you might expect near a wormhole. I knew I was getting close, but I needed more precise information. I returned to the dark web, diving into chat rooms and forums, talking to anyone who might have leads. Most people dismissed me as a crackpot, but a few seemed genuinely interested in helping. One user pointed me to a hidden database of government documents, a treasure trove of classified information that might hold the key. Accessing the database was a challenge in itself. It was protected by layers of encryption and security protocols. After countless attempts and some help from anonymous hackers, I finally broke through. The files were massive, but I managed to narrow down my search to Project Tempest-related documents. There it was, buried deep within a series of reports from the 1960s and 70s. A detailed account of the wormhole's discovery. The report included coordinates, but they were encoded. I spent hours decoding them, my heart racing with anticipation. Finally, I had it. The coordinates pointed to a remote area near Gold Dust Creek, right in the heart of the abandoned mine. It wasn't an exact location, but it was close enough to start searching on the ground. I couldn't believe it. I was on the verge of discovering something that could change everything. I had the coordinates, and I was ready to go. My next step was to prepare for the trip, to find the wormhole and see it with my own eyes. All right, Reddit, here's what happened next. After finding the coordinates pointing to a remote area near Gold Dust Creek, I couldn't contain my excitement. I quickly gathered my gear, flashlight, camping supplies, GPS, and made a plan to check it out. I had to see this wormhole for myself. The drive to Nevada was long and filled with anticipation. When I arrived at Gold Dust Creek, the place was even more desolate than I had imagined. The entrance to the abandoned mine was easy to find, thanks to the old maps and geological reports I had studied. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. I made my way into the mine, following the coordinates I had decoded. The tunnels twisted and turned, and the deeper I went, the colder it got. My flashlight flickered as I navigated through the narrow passages. Despite the eerie atmosphere, I felt a sense of determination. This was it, the moment I had been working towards. After what felt like hours of searching, I finally reached the spot indicated by the coordinates. But when I got there, I was met with nothing but an empty chamber. There was no wormhole, no strange lights or sounds, just the cold, damp darkness of the mine. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. Had I missed something? Was this all just a wild goose chase? I searched the chamber thoroughly, looking for any signs I might have overlooked. But there was nothing. no hidden doors, no mysterious symbols, nothing. I sat down on a rock, feeling defeated. All those hours of research, all the anticipation, and it had led to nothing. Reluctantly, I made my way back out of the mine. The journey back to my car was filled with a heavy sense of failure. I couldn't believe it. Had I been tricked? Had I misinterpreted the clues? The disappointment was crushing. The drive home was a blur. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind, trying to figure out where I went wrong. By the time I got back, it was late, and I was exhausted. I collapsed into bed, unable to shake the feeling that I had missed something important. Over the next few days, I tried to move on, but I couldn't let it go. The mystery of Project Tempest and the elusive wormhole haunted me. I knew I had to keep searching, even if I didn't know where to start. Hey Reddit, I'm back again. After the trip to Gold Dust Creek and finding nothing, I've been in a strange headspace. For days I tried to piece it all together, but no matter how much I racked my brain, I couldn't solve it. Maybe it was just another conspiracy theory, one more bizarre story you find online that leads nowhere. I revisited the documents and maps, scouring them for any detail I might have missed. But everything pointed to that same empty chamber. It felt like I was chasing ghosts. The more I thought about it, the more I began to doubt everything. Had I been duped by an elaborate hoax? Was Flex 20 just some troll leading me on a wild goose chase? The more I dug, the more it seemed like there were too many holes in the story. The reports, the videos, they all felt just a little too perfect, too cinematic. Maybe I had fallen for a cleverly crafted piece of fiction. The dark web is full of them after all. I even tried reaching out to Flex 20 again, but there was no response. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Without any new leads, I started to lose hope. Maybe there was no Project Tempest, no wormhole, just an elaborate tale spun by someone with too much time on their hands. I couldn't help but feel foolish. I had invested so much time and energy into this, and it seemed like it had all been for nothing. The thrill of the hunt had blinded me to the possibility that it was all just a fantasy. A part of me still wanted to believe, but the rational part of my mind kept telling me it was over. In the end, maybe this is just another story in the vast sea of internet conspiracies. Who knows? I guess sometimes you have to accept that not every mystery can be solved. Hey Reddit, this is the last update. After everything, I've come to a sobering conclusion. I can't solve this mystery. Maybe there is no mystery at all. Just another conspiracy theory in the endless sea of internet speculation. I've spent countless hours digging through obscure documents, decrypting files, and even exploring an abandoned mine, only to come up empty-handed. It's frustrating, but sometimes that's how these things go. The truth is, we may never know if Project Tempest or the wormhole ever existed. I went over every piece of information I gathered, trying to find a clue that would point me in a new direction. I reviewed the old mining maps, the geological surveys, and the cryptic messages from Flex 20. I even considered the possibility that the wormhole was somehow mobile, shifting locations over time. But every theory I came up with fell apart under scrutiny. There were moments when I thought I was on the verge of a breakthrough, like the time I found an old newspaper article about strange disappearances in the Gold Dust Creek area. It matched the time frame of the Project Tempest experiments, but when I dug deeper, the details didn't hold up. The disappearances could be attributed to natural hazards or the harsh conditions of the Nevada wilderness. Nothing definitively linked them to a secret government time travel project. I started reaching out to other researchers and conspiracy theorists, hoping someone else might have found a piece of the puzzle that I missed. Some of them had interesting stories and theories, but no one had concrete evidence. It was all just speculation, layered upon speculation. I even contacted a few former government employees who were rumored to have knowledge of classified projects, but most of them either didn't respond or flat out denied any involvement. At one point, I even considered the possibility that Flex 20 was a disinformation agent, deliberately spreading false leads to keep people like me chasing shadows. It wouldn't be the first time the government employed such tactics. But even that theory seemed too far-fetched. Why go to such lengths to protect something that might not even exist? I realized that I was falling into the same trap that so many others have. The deeper you go, the harder it is to separate fact from fiction. The internet is a breeding ground for rumors and half-truths, and it's easy to get lost in the maze of conflicting information. So I've decided to step back. I can't keep chasing this ghost forever. It's time to accept that some mysteries might never be solved. But here's the thing. If you're reading this and you think you can crack it, go ahead. You have my full support. Dive into the research, explore the dark web, follow the leads. Just be careful. Remember, until there's solid proof, all of this remains a conspiracy theory. Document everything you find, and don't let your curiosity blind you to the potential dangers. There are real risks involved in digging into these kinds of secrets, and it's important to stay grounded. Sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. I've learned a lot along the way, even if it wasn't the truth I was hoping to find. The thrill of the hunt, the late nights spent poring over documents, the excitement of discovering a new clue. It's been an adventure in its own right. And who knows? Maybe the next person who takes up this quest will find the missing piece that ties it all together. In the end, the search for truth is what matters. Keep your mind open, but be skeptical. Question everything, but don't lose sight of reality. Some mysteries might never be solved, and that's okay. The world is full of unknowns, and part of what makes life interesting is the possibility of discovery. Thanks for following along. It's been a wild ride, and I appreciate all the support and feedback. Stay curious, stay safe, and good luck. If you find something, anything, that sheds light on Project Tempest or the Gateway, don't hesitate to share it. The truth is out there, and maybe, just maybe, one of you will be the one to uncover it. Hey everyone, I'm not sure if I should even be posting this, but I need to get it off my chest. It's been eating at me for months, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. This story isn't for the faint of heart, so if you scare easily, turn back now. It all started on a rainy Tuesday night. You know, one of those nights where the wind is so strong it almost feels like it's going to break the windows. I was scrolling through my usual web pages, diving deep into conspiracy theories and urban legends, when I stumbled upon a post on a forum I frequent. This wasn't your average spooky tale. It was about a device that supposedly allowed you to see spirits. Intrigued, I couldn't resist diving deeper. The post detailed a pair of eye lenses, developed by some person known only as Ghost Hunter 99. According to the post, these lenses had the ability to reveal spirits that lingered just beyond our perception. The catch? They were available exclusively on the dark web for a hefty price of $1,000 in Bitcoin. The price seemed outrageous, but the idea of seeing the unseen was too enticing to ignore. I spent the next few hours navigating the dark web, a place that still sends shivers down my spine. It's a maze of encrypted sites, a digital underworld where anonymity reigns supreme. After a few dead ends and questionable links, I finally found the marketplace selling the lenses. The page was minimalistic, almost sterile, with a single image of the lenses and a brief description. See the world beyond. Discover the truth. Price: 0.03 BTC. I hesitated. $1,000 is a lot of money, especially for something that sounded like it came straight out of a horror movie. But curiosity got the better of me. I transferred the Bitcoin, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach as I did. After the transaction went through, I received a message from the seller. Thank you for your purchase. Your lenses will arrive within 3 days. Use them wisely. The next few days were a blur of nervous anticipation. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. What if the lenses were a scam? Or worse, what if they actually worked? I tried to distract myself with work and socializing, but my mind kept drifting back to the package that was on its way. During those 3 days, I found myself constantly checking my email for updates, even though I knew it was unlikely that there would be any. Each night, as I lay in bed, I would think about the lenses and what they might reveal. My mind was a whirlpool of excitement and dread, each emotion feeding off the other. I started to notice the smallest things, creaks in the floorboards that I never paid attention to before, noises in the night that seemed louder than usual. I even found myself double-checking the locks on my doors and windows, something I never usually did. The idea of seeing spirits, of glimpsing into another realm, was fascinating, but terrifying. Finally, on the 3rd day, a small unmarked package arrived at my doorstep. My heart pounded as I picked it up, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should have. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table, staring at it for what felt like an eternity. This was it, the moment of truth. I opened the package with trembling hands, revealing a sleek black case inside. The lenses were nestled within, looking surprisingly ordinary for something so extraordinary. There was no instruction manual, just a small note that read, "Once you see them, they see you." I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it as a scare tactic. But deep down, I felt a chill run down my spine. With a deep breath, I closed the case and decided to wait until the next day to try them out. I needed time to prepare myself for whatever might come next. That night, I barely slept. Every little noise, every gust of wind outside felt amplified, like the world was alive with unseen entities. The note's warning echoed in my mind. Once you see them, they see you. All right, here we go with part 2. After the package arrived, I was hesitant to actually put on the lenses. It felt like I was holding something incredibly dangerous, like a loaded gun. The note that came with it, "Once you see them, they see you," kept replaying in my mind. It was creepy, and I didn't know if I was ready to face whatever these lenses might reveal. I decided to call my best friend, Mike. He's always been the rational one, the guy who keeps me grounded. If anyone could give me some solid advice, it was him. So I explained the whole situation to him, from stumbling upon the lenses on the dark web to the package finally arriving. Mike listened patiently, but I could hear the skepticism in his voice. "Dude, it's probably fake," he said. "Think about it. $1,000 for some lenses that let you see spirits. Sounds like a classic scam to me. You're not really thinking of putting them on, are you?" His words made sense, but there was still a part of me that was curious. I mean, what if it was real? What if these lenses could actually let me see spirits? The thought was terrifying, but also incredibly intriguing. I thanked Mike for his advice, but I could tell he thought I was being ridiculous. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, staring at the black case on the table. I felt like I was at a crossroads. One path led to potentially uncovering a whole new world, and the other led to staying safe, but always wondering what might have been. I couldn't focus on anything else for the rest of the day. I tried watching TV, playing video games, even going for a walk, but my mind kept drifting back to the lenses. That tiny black case felt like it was calling to me, demanding my attention. The following day, I decided to do some more research. I scoured the internet for any information about these lenses, or anyone who might have used them. Surprisingly, I found very little. A few vague references on obscure forums, but nothing concrete. It was like this whole thing was shrouded in mystery, adding to my anxiety. I started doubting myself. Maybe Mike was right. Maybe it was all just an elaborate scam. But then I thought about the dark web marketplace, the minimalistic yet eerie description, and the note that came with the lenses. It all seemed so deliberately mysterious, like there was something more to it. As the days went by, my curiosity grew stronger. I kept the lenses in their case, but I couldn't stop thinking about them. Every night, as I lay in bed, I imagined what I might see if I put them on. Would I see spirits? Would they be friendly or hostile? The possibilities were endless, and it was driving me crazy. Finally, I decided to seek advice from the Reddit community. I've seen some crazy and helpful things on here, so I thought, why not? Maybe someone out there had experienced something similar or had some useful insight, so here I am, asking for your help. Should I put these lenses on? Part of me is dying to know if they really work, but the other part of me is scared out of my mind. Has anyone ever heard of something like this? What would you do in my situation? I know it sounds crazy, but I'm genuinely torn. The rational side of me says to throw them away and forget about it, but the curious side just won't let it go. Any advice or experiences you can share would be greatly appreciated. Hey everyone, thanks for all the feedback and advice on my last post. After reading through your comments and messages, I decided to go for it. I mean, curiosity was eating me alive, and so many of you were just as intrigued as I was. So, Reddit made me do it. I put on the lenses. I sat down on my couch, the black case in my lap. My hands were shaking as I opened it and took out the lenses. They looked so ordinary, like any other contact lenses. I took a deep breath, popped them in, and blinked a few times to get them settled. At first, everything looked the same. My living room was just as it had always been, nothing unusual. I waited for something to happen, anything, but there was nothing. I stood up and walked around my apartment, expecting to see spirits or some sort of otherworldly phenomena, but everything was completely normal. I spent the next hour doing everything I could think of to activate the lenses. I turned off the lights, thinking maybe the dark would reveal something. I walked into every room, even the basement, where I always felt a little uneasy. But still, there was nothing. No ghosts, no spirits, no strange entities lurking in the corners. Feeling a bit foolish, I sat back down on the couch and took the lenses out. It was disappointing, to say the least. After all the build-up and anticipation, it turned out to be nothing more than a waste of $1,000 and a lot of unnecessary anxiety. Mike was right. It was probably just a scam. But then I started thinking about the nature of scams and how they play on our deepest fears and desires. The whole experience made me realize how powerful curiosity can be and how easy it is to get caught up in the excitement of the unknown. So, to anyone who was following my story and wondering if the lenses worked, sorry to disappoint, but they were fake. Nothing happened. No spirits, no revelations, just a lot of hype for nothing. I guess the lesson here is to be careful about what you buy into, especially on the dark web. Sometimes things that seem too good or too creepy to be true really are just that. Hey everyone, back with an update. So after my last post about the lenses being fake and nothing happening, I thought that was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few days after I put the lenses on, weird things started happening around my house. At first it was small stuff. I'd leave my keys on the kitchen counter and later find them on the living room table. I thought I was just being forgetful, but then it got stranger. One morning, I woke up to find my bookshelf completely rearranged. Books that I knew I hadn't touched in months were now in different spots. I live alone, so there was no one else who could have moved them. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I did it absent-mindedly, but deep down, I felt uneasy. The next day, my coffee maker, which always sits on the counter, was on the dining table when I woke up. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I started paying more attention to my surroundings, and sure enough, almost every day something would be out of place. One night I came home from work to find all the lights in my house turned on. I distinctly remember turning them off before leaving. That's when I started to panic. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something weird was definitely happening. I tried to think back to when all this started, and the only thing that came to mind was those damn lenses. Even though they seemed fake at first, it was after putting them on that everything went sideways. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe they did something I couldn't see. So in a moment of pure fear and frustration, I grabbed the lenses from their case, drove to the nearby river, and threw them in. Watching them sink into the water, I hoped that would be the end of it. Maybe I was overthinking it, but I'm sure something evil was happening. Things calmed down a bit after that. No more objects moving around, no more strange occurrences. It's like whatever presence was in my house left with the lenses. I still don't know what to make of it all. Maybe the lenses were cursed, or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Either way, I'm glad to be rid of them. Hey everyone, back for what I hope is the final part of this strange saga. After throwing the lenses into the river, things have mostly returned to normal. No more unexplained movements of objects, no weird occurrences. It's been a relief, to say the least. Even now, I'm not entirely sure if the lenses were real or not. Maybe they had some sort of power, or maybe the weird events were just my mind playing tricks on me. I guess I'll never really know. All I do know is that life feels a lot less creepy without them around. In the days following my drastic decision to get rid of the lenses, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that happened. I started to piece together the timeline of events, trying to find some rational explanation. I even considered the possibility that my stress and anxiety about the lenses might have led me to imagine or misinterpret the events. But even with this in mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something genuinely eerie had been going on. I reached out to Mike again, filling him in on the strange happenings and my decision to dispose of the lenses. He listened patiently, and although he maintained his skepticism, he admitted that the whole situation was pretty unsettling. "Maybe it's best you got rid of them," he said. "Even if they were just a scam, it's not worth the stress and paranoia." Mike's pragmatic view helped me put things in perspective. Sometimes whether something is real or imagined doesn't matter as much as the impact it has on your life. Those lenses, real or not, brought a lot of fear and uncertainty into my home. Getting rid of them was like lifting a weight off my shoulders. In the weeks that followed, I made a conscious effort to steer clear of anything that even remotely resembled the lenses incident. I avoided the dark web entirely, not wanting to risk another encounter with something potentially dangerous. My fascination with the supernatural and the unexplained took a back seat as I focused on more grounded, everyday interests. One night, out of curiosity, I decided to revisit the forum where I first learned about the lenses. I found the original post and read through the comments. There were a few others who claimed to have purchased the lenses, but their experiences varied wildly. Some said they saw nothing, just like I initially did, while others recounted strange, unsettling events similar to my own. It was clear that no one had definitive answers. I shared my story on the forum, hoping to connect with others who might have gone through something similar. The responses were a mix of skepticism and empathy. Some users thanked me for sharing and warned others to be cautious, while a few insisted it was all in my head. One comment stood out to me: whether it's real or not, if it messes with your peace of mind, it's not worth it. That simple piece of advice resonated with me deeply. At the end of the day, the most important thing is to protect your own well-being. The lenses, whatever they were, disrupted my life in a way that wasn't healthy. Moving forward, I decided to prioritize my mental and emotional health over satisfying my curiosity about the unknown. Thanks to everyone who followed along and offered advice. Your support kept me grounded during a really unsettling time. I hope my story serves as a warning. Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be sharing this, but here I am. It's a bit unsettling, so buckle up. I've been into conspiracy theories for a while now, mostly for the fun of it. You know, reading about aliens, government cover-ups, secret societies, all that jazz. But a few months ago I stumbled upon something that's been haunting me ever since. It all started when I ventured into the dark web. Yeah, I know, it sounds cliché, but hear me out. I was poking around some forums, just looking for some new material to feed my curiosity. That's when I found a thread titled, "The Truth About Easter Island, More Than Just Statues." Easter Island always intrigued me. with its massive moai statues that seemed to stare into the soul. But this thread promised something different, something much darker. The first post was from an anonymous user who claimed to have insider information, and it was detailed, with an almost obsessive amount of information. The user, who went by the name Orion's Truth, posted scans of ancient manuscripts, old photographs, and documents that looked official, though heavily redacted. The theory was wild. The moai statues of Easter Island were not just remnants of an ancient civilization, but markers of something much more sinister. According to the documents, these statues were built by an advanced civilization that had contact with extraterrestrial beings. I know, it sounds insane, but the way it was presented was compelling. The documents showed diagrams of the statues with symbols and annotations that hinted at a technology far beyond what the islanders should have had. There were references to energy sources and dimensional portals. It was like reading a sci-fi novel, except it all felt disturbingly real. The photos were the most unsettling part. One showed a partially unearthed moai with strange carvings on its base that were not present on any of the other publicly known statues. Another photo was of an excavation site, with what appeared to be a metallic object embedded deep within the island's rock. It looked like a piece of machinery, and not something that could have been crafted with the tools available to the islanders centuries ago. The deeper I delved into the thread, the stranger it got. There were eyewitness accounts from locals who spoke of eerie lights over the island, and a persistent hum that seemed to emanate from the statues themselves. One post described a ritual performed by the island's inhabitants, supposedly to appease the guardians of the statues. According to the account, this ritual involved chanting in a language that no one could identify, not even the most knowledgeable linguists. I was hooked. I spent hours reading through every detail, downloading every image and document I could find. The thread had links to other sites, hidden deep in the dark web, that promised more information. One link led to a site that seemed to be a repository of classified documents from various governments. There, I found files on Easter Island, from agencies like the CIA and even the Vatican, all talking about an unknown energy source detected on the island. One document in particular stood out. It was a declassified memo from the 1950s, detailing an expedition to Easter Island. The memo mentioned a discovery of significant importance that was immediately classified as top secret. The expedition team apparently found something beneath the statues, something they described as not of this world. It was late at night and I was alone in my room, the glow of my computer screen the only light. The more I read, the more I felt a creeping dread. This wasn't just a fun conspiracy theory anymore. It felt like I was uncovering something that wasn't meant to be found. I started to feel like I was being watched, my paranoia growing with each passing minute. Then, just as I was about to shut everything down and try to get some sleep, a message popped up on my screen. It was from Orion's Truth, the original poster. It simply said, "You've seen too much. Be careful." That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've noticed strange things happening around me. My computer has been acting up, and I've seen unfamiliar cars parked near my house. I can't shake the feeling that someone or something is watching me. But I can't stop now. I need to know the truth about Easter Island, no matter how terrifying it might be. All right, here we go again. After that ominous message from Orion's Truth, I couldn't just let it go. I mean, how often do you stumble upon something that feels like it's straight out of a thriller? Despite the growing paranoia, I had to dig deeper. The next step was accessing the hidden files linked in the dark web forum. The first link I followed took me to a page that looked like a digital archive from a bygone era, filled with PDFs, scanned images, and documents in various languages. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, but I had to focus. One folder caught my eye: Expeditions, Easter Island, 1955. This had to be the same expedition mentioned in the memo I found earlier. The folder contained dozens of documents, but the one that stood out was titled Project Rapa Nui, Final Report. As I opened it, a chill ran down my spine. The report detailed the findings of a joint American-Chilean expedition that had been on the island for 6 months. The team was composed of archaeologists, linguists, and, intriguingly, a few engineers and physicists, an unusual mix for a standard archaeological dig. The report started with the usual observations about the Moai statues and their construction, but soon veered into strange territory. They mentioned finding an underground chamber beneath one of the statues. This chamber was lined with a metal alloy that couldn't be identified by their equipment at the time. Inside, they found a series of tablets covered in inscriptions that bore no resemblance to any known language or script. One section of the report included translated snippets of these inscriptions. The translations were fragmented, but what they managed to decipher spoke of sky visitors and gateways to other worlds. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. It was like reading a lost chapter of some ancient sci-fi epic, except this was a government document. The further I read, the more unsettling it got. There were references to unusual electromagnetic readings around the statues, especially at night. The scientists noted that their equipment often malfunctioned in the vicinity of the statues, as if some unseen force was interfering with their instruments. They even reported strange sightings, lights in the sky, shadows moving across the landscape with no apparent source. The most disturbing part was the conclusion. The lead scientist wrote that the Moai were not just statues but markers for something buried deep beneath the island, something that had lain dormant for millennia. They speculated that these markers were part of a larger network, a kind of grid that extended far beyond Easter Island. The implications were staggering. If true, it suggested a level of technology and knowledge far beyond what ancient civilizations should have possessed. I took a break, my mind racing. This was getting too intense. I decided to check the next link, which led to a video archive. One of the videos was titled Interview with Local Shaman, 1973. I clicked on it, and an old, grainy black and white video began to play. It showed an elderly man, his face weathered and eyes sharp, speaking in a language I didn't understand. Subtitles in English appeared at the bottom of the screen. The shaman spoke of the island's ancient legends, passed down through generations. He told of the Watchers, beings who came from the stars and taught the islanders how to harness the power of the earth and sky. He claimed that the Moai were built to honor these beings and to mark the locations where their knowledge was stored. According to him, the statues were also a warning, a way to keep intruders away from what lay beneath. His words were eerie, but what really got to me was his expression. There was no doubt or hesitation, only a solemn certainty. It was as if he were reciting a well-known fact, not some far-fetched myth. The video ended with the shaman warning that disturbing the statues would bring misfortune, as the guardians would awaken to protect their secrets. I sat back, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. This was more than just a conspiracy theory. The documents, the videos, the eyewitness accounts, they all painted a picture of something truly extraordinary, yet terrifying. It felt like I was peering into a hidden world, one that was not meant to be uncovered. As I continued to sift through the files, I found a map marked with locations of other suspected Moai sites around the world. If this was true, it meant that Easter Island was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The idea that there might be other sites with similar secrets sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I couldn't stop now. There were too many unanswered questions. What was the true purpose of the Moai statues? What did the ancient civilization know that we didn't? And most importantly, what were they protecting? Hey everyone, back again with the next part of this wild journey. After uncovering those disturbing documents and videos, I couldn't just sit still. I had to know more, so I started looking into modern-day researchers who might have picked up on these threads. What I found only added more layers to this already intricate mystery. I came across a group of independent researchers who called themselves the Easter Island Truth Seekers. They had a website that looked pretty amateurish, but the content was anything but. These folks were serious. They'd been digging into the mysteries of Easter Island for years, and their findings were as compelling as they were unsettling. One of their most significant discoveries was a series of magnetic anomalies on the island. Using state-of-the-art equipment, they mapped out areas where the Earth's magnetic field was unusually strong or weak. Interestingly, these anomalies were concentrated around the Moai statues. The researchers proposed that the statues weren't just decorative, but served as some kind of ancient technology, possibly harnessing the Earth's magnetic energy. This theory was bolstered by a finding from a remote part of the island. The team had uncovered what they believed to be a control room of sorts, buried deep underground. It was filled with strange metal objects and crystalline structures that emitted faint, pulsating lights. According to their report, when they attempted to remove one of the crystals, the ground began to shake, and they quickly abandoned the effort. The island, it seemed, was warning them. Then there were the testimonies from locals. One story stood out in particular. An elderly islander recounted how, as a child, he and his friends used to play near one of the Moai. One evening, they saw a bright light emerge from the statue's eyes, and a low hum filled the air. Terrified, they ran back to their village. But when they returned the next day, there were strange symbols etched into the ground around the statue. He swore that none of those markings had been there before. The truth seekers also conducted underwater explorations around the island. They found submerged structures that looked remarkably like the Moai, but these were far more eroded, suggesting they had been underwater for much longer than the statues on land. Some of these underwater Moai appeared to be pointing in specific directions, almost like they were guiding something or someone. Their investigations led them to other parts of the world, where they found similar statues and structures. In particular, they identified sites in South America, the Pacific Islands, and even parts of Asia where the same magnetic anomalies and mysterious artifacts were present. One striking example was a statue found in a remote region of Peru, which bore a striking resemblance to the Moai, but was covered in symbols that seemed to match those on the Easter Island tablets. The truth seekers believed that these sites were part of a global network established by an ancient civilization. They speculated that this civilization had knowledge of magnetic fields, energy manipulation, and possibly even interstellar communication. The idea was mind-blowing and terrifying in equal measure. If true, it meant that the history we knew was just the tip of the iceberg. What really got to me was the potential link to extraterrestrial beings. The researchers had collected accounts from various indigenous peoples around the world, all of whom spoke of visitors from the stars who brought knowledge and warnings. These stories were eerily similar, despite being separated by thousands of miles and countless years. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence was a set of carvings found in a cave on Easter Island. The carvings depicted tall, slender beings with elongated heads, surrounded by stars. Next to these beings were images of the Moai statues and what appeared to be a spacecraft. The researchers theorized that these carvings were a record of the islanders' interactions with these sky visitors. The implications were staggering. If these ancient peoples had indeed been in contact with extraterrestrial beings, it would rewrite everything we know about human history. It would also explain why the island and its statues were so heavily guarded and shrouded in mystery. As I continued to piece together these findings, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting closer to something monumental, something that was meant to stay hidden. The modern researchers' work added a new dimension to the story, connecting the ancient past to our present in a way that was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. Hey everyone, back with part 4. If you've been following along, you know that things have been getting pretty intense. The deeper I dug, the more it seemed like Easter Island's mysteries were connected to a vast, ancient network. But what I found next added a whole new level of intrigue and danger. After learning about the independent researchers and their discoveries, I started noticing a pattern. Many of the most compelling findings had been either dismissed or outright ignored by mainstream academia and media. This struck me as odd, given how potentially groundbreaking these discoveries were. I decided to look into why this might be. I stumbled upon a document cache from a whistleblower who claimed to have worked for a government agency tasked with cultural preservation. The documents were full of coded language, but the gist was clear. There were efforts to suppress certain archaeological findings, especially those related to advanced ancient civilizations and extraterrestrial contact. One particularly chilling memo detailed a directive to sanitize any information that suggested ancient peoples had access to advanced technology. The justification was that such information could destabilize current scientific understanding and cause public unrest. The memo mentioned Easter Island specifically, citing the Moai statues and the underground chamber as top priorities. The whistleblower's documents also included correspondence between various governments and organizations. One email exchange discussed an excavation on Easter Island, where researchers found a metallic object embedded deep in the rock, similar to what the truth seekers had reported. However, the official report released to the public made no mention of this find, only noting that the excavation yielded insignificant artifacts. Things took an even darker turn when I found a series of redacted reports from the 1970s and 80s, detailing covert operations on Easter Island. These reports referenced a special task force known as Project Sentinel. Their mission was to monitor and, if necessary, intervene in any research activities that might uncover or publicize the hidden technologies and extraterrestrial connections of the Moai statues. One report from Project Sentinel described an incident where a team of researchers was forcibly removed from the island after they discovered a sensitive artifact. The artifact in question was described as a small, intricately carved device that emitted a faint glow. The researchers were told they had violated international cultural preservation laws, and their findings were confiscated. They were warned to remain silent, or they would face severe consequences. The whistleblower also provided photos of strange, unmarked helicopters spotted over Easter Island. Locals reported these helicopters frequently appeared after unusual events, such as mysterious lights in the sky or tremors near the statues. These sightings were always followed by increased military presence and restricted access to certain parts of the island. The more I read, the more I realized that there was a concerted effort to keep the true nature of Easter Island a secret. This wasn't just about protecting ancient heritage. It was about controlling information that could potentially rewrite human history. The implications were enormous. If the Moai statues were markers of an advanced ancient civilization with extraterrestrial connections, it would challenge everything we know about our past. I reached out to one of the truth seekers, a researcher named Elena, who agreed to speak with me on the condition of anonymity. She told me about the constant threats and harassment they faced. Their equipment was often sabotaged, and their funding mysteriously dried up. She even mentioned instances where team members received anonymous phone calls warning them to stop their research. Elena shared a particularly disturbing incident. During one of their expeditions, they found a hidden cave with ancient drawings that depicted the Moai statues interacting with what looked like alien beings. Before they could document everything, their campsite was raided. Men in black uniforms carrying no identifying marks confiscated their equipment and destroyed their notes. They were warned that if they ever returned, they would face severe repercussions. Despite the dangers, Elena and her team were determined to uncover the truth. They believed that the knowledge hidden on Easter Island could benefit humanity, offering insights into ancient technologies and perhaps even new sources of energy. But they were up against powerful forces that wanted to keep that knowledge buried. As I absorbed all this information, I realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. This wasn't just a matter of academic curiosity. It was a battle over the control of history itself. The suppression of information about Easter Island and its secrets was part of a larger agenda to maintain the status quo and prevent any disruptions to established narratives. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me. We've reached the final part of this journey, and I promise it's worth it. After everything I've uncovered, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to learn. The truth about Easter Island seemed just out of reach, but I had to keep going. With the help of Elena and the truth seekers, I managed to get in touch with a retired archaeologist who had worked on Easter Island during the 1980s. Dr. Hiram was hesitant at first, but after some persuasion, he agreed to meet with me. What he revealed was nothing short of astonishing. Dr. Hiram told me that during his time on the island, he had stumbled upon an ancient manuscript hidden in a cave. This manuscript, written in a mix of Rongorongo script and an unknown language, contained detailed instructions on how to activate what it called the Guardians of the Island. He believed these guardians were somehow connected to the Moai statues and their mysterious energies. The manuscript described a ceremony that involved aligning the statues with specific constellations and chanting an ancient incantation. According to the text, this would unlock the island's true power, a power that could either protect or destroy, depending on the intent of those who performed the ceremony. Dr. Hiram's discovery was immediately confiscated by government agents, and he was sworn to secrecy. He left the island soon after, but the memory of what he had found never left him. He believed that the Guardians were a form of ancient technology, possibly left by an advanced civilization or even extraterrestrial beings, as the legend suggested. Armed with this new information, I contacted Elena again. Together, we decided to attempt to decode the manuscript's instructions. It took weeks of research and cross-referencing with other ancient texts, but we finally had a working theory. We believed that the Guardians were a form of energy grid, capable of harnessing the Earth's magnetic fields. If activated, they could either provide immense power or act as a defense mechanism against any threats. One evening, under a starry sky, we gathered near one of the largest Moai statues. Using the manuscript's instructions, we carefully aligned the statue with a constellation that matched the description in the text. Elena began to chant the ancient incantation, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. At first, nothing happened. Then, as the final words of the chant echoed into the night, a low hum began to emanate from the statue. The ground beneath us trembled slightly, and a faint glow appeared around the base of the Moai. It was working. The energy we had read about was real, and it was awakening. Suddenly, lights flickered across the island, tracing invisible lines between the statues. It was as if a hidden network was coming to life, connecting each Moai in a web of energy. The hum grew louder, and the air around us crackled with electricity. For a brief moment, it felt like we were standing at the center of an incredible power source, something ancient and beyond our understanding. Then, just as quickly as it started, the lights faded and the hum ceased. The island returned to its quiet state, but we knew something profound had just occurred. We had tapped into a force that had been dormant for centuries, perhaps even millennia. The Guardians of Easter Island were real, and their power was undeniable. In the days that followed, we noticed subtle changes. The magnetic anomalies around the island intensified, and locals reported seeing strange lights in the sky again. It was as if the island itself was awakening, responding to the activation of its hidden energy grid. Our actions had not gone unnoticed. We received messages from anonymous sources warning us to cease our activities. But we also received support from unexpected places. Scientists, historians, and even some government officials who believed that the truth about Easter Island needed to be revealed. In the end, what we discovered was not just about ancient technology or extraterrestrial contact. It was about the power of knowledge and the lengths to which some would go to protect or suppress it. Easter Island's secrets were part of a larger puzzle, one that spanned the globe and connected humanity to its distant past in ways we are only beginning to understand. As I write this, I can't help but feel a mix of awe and responsibility. The truth is out there, waiting to be uncovered. Easter Island is just one piece of a much larger story, and it's up to us to continue seeking the answers. Hey Reddit, I've always considered myself a rational person. You know, grounded in reality and all that, but recently I stumbled upon something so bizarre, so unsettling, that it's made me question everything I thought I knew. This is the story of how a random night of browsing the internet led me down a rabbit hole that I still haven't fully crawled out of. It started like any other night. I was scrolling through Reddit, jumping from one thread to another, looking for anything interesting to kill time. I ended up on a thread about the dark web. I've always been curious about it, but never had the guts to explore it myself. But that night, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to take a peek. I won't go into the details of how I accessed the dark web, but let's just say, it's not as hard as people make it out to be. After navigating through a few sketchy marketplaces and forums, I found myself on a site called the Quantum Traveler's Journal. The name intrigued me, so I clicked on it. The site was basic, almost like an old-school blog. The posts were written by someone who called himself the Light Bearer. His first post was a long, rambling introduction about how he had discovered the secret to traveling at the speed of light. Naturally, I thought it was all nonsense, but something about his writing style drew me in. He claimed that as you approach the speed of light, time for you would slow down relative to someone on Earth. This isn't new information. It's a well-known theory in physics. But he took it a step further. According to him, if you could actually travel at the speed of light, time for you would effectively stop. He explained that while you might perceive your journey as instantaneous, many years or even centuries could pass on Earth. It was a wild theory, but what really caught my attention was his claim that he had built a machine capable of achieving this. The next few posts were detailed descriptions of his experiments. He wrote about how he started with simple objects, sending them at nearly the speed of light and observing the results. The posts were filled with technical jargon and complex equations that went way over my head. But then, things started getting weird. He included videos and photos of his experiments. The first video was of a small metal sphere inside a glass chamber. He explained that the chamber was designed to accelerate the sphere to near light speed. As the machine powered up, the sphere began to glow, and then, in a flash, it vanished. The video cut off abruptly, and the next post was a series of photos showing the same sphere, now aged and corroded, as if it had been buried for centuries. But according to him, only a few minutes had passed since the experiment. I was hooked. I spent hours reading through his posts, each one more bizarre than the last. He wrote about how he started experimenting with living organisms, small insects at first, then mice. The videos showed the same pattern. The subjects would vanish in a flash of light, only to reappear moments later, visibly aged and altered. But the most disturbing part was yet to come. In his latest post, he wrote about how he had decided to test the machine on himself. He claimed that he was going to travel at the speed of light and return to see how much time had passed on Earth. The post ended with a video. It showed him standing in front of the machine, explaining his plan. He looked calm, almost excited. The last thing he said before the video cut off was, "If this works, I'll see you on the other side." That was the last post. There were no updates, no further videos or photos. The site went silent. I sat there, staring at the screen, a chill running down my spine. Part of me wanted to believe it was all an elaborate hoax, some kind of ARG or performance art. But another part of me, the part that had seen the videos and read the detailed accounts, wasn't so sure. I spent the rest of the night searching for any information about the light bearer or his experiments, but I found nothing. It was as if he had vanished without a trace. I know this all sounds crazy, and maybe it is, but something about that site, those videos, felt real. Too real. I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this story. Something lurking just out of reach. I'll keep looking, and if I find anything new, I'll update you all. But for now, I'm left with more questions than answers and a growing sense of unease that I can't quite explain. If any of you have seen or heard anything about this, please let me know. I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's been drawn into this mystery. Hey Reddit, I'm back with more updates on the bizarre story I shared earlier about the light bearer and his supposed experiments with traveling at the speed of light. After my initial deep dive, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. So, I continued my search, and what I found has only deepened the mystery. After spending hours scouring the internet, I came across an obscure physics forum where someone had mentioned the light bearer. The post was buried deep within a thread about fringe science and outlandish theories. The user who posted it claimed to have come across similar experiments years ago and provided a link to another dark website. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with possibilities before clicking the link. This new site was even more rudimentary than the first. It looked like it hadn't been updated in years. The homepage was a simple text file that read, "For those who seek the truth about light-speed travel." The site contained a series of posts by different users, each claiming to have conducted their own experiments or to have known the light bearer personally. One post stood out. It was from someone who called themselves Shadow Scientist. They claimed to have collaborated with the light bearer and provided detailed accounts of their joint experiments. According to Shadow Scientist, they had worked together in a hidden lab located in an undisclosed location. The lab was equipped with state-of-the-art technology, most of which was custom-built. They detailed how they began with inanimate objects before moving on to living subjects. This corroborated the light bearer's accounts, but with more technical detail and scientific jargon. One experiment they described was particularly chilling. They claimed to have sent a small plant at near light speed. When it reappeared, it was not only aged but also mutated in strange ways. The leaves were twisted, and the stem was covered in unusual growths. They speculated that the extreme conditions of light-speed travel had caused the plant's DNA to alter in unexpected ways. The posts went on to describe how they decided to push the boundaries further. They conducted experiments on small mammals, documenting each step meticulously. The videos and photos attached to the posts were unsettling. Mice and rabbits would disappear in a flash of light and reappear minutes later, visibly aged and sometimes showing signs of genetic mutations. The final post from Shadow Scientist was a cryptic message. They wrote that the light bearer was determined to test the machine on himself despite their warnings. They expressed deep concern about the potential consequences but admitted they were also curious about the outcome. The post ended with, "If he succeeds, we may unlock the secrets of the universe. If he fails, it could be the end of us all." I was left with a sense of dread. What happened to the light bearer after he stepped into that machine? Did he truly travel at the speed of light? And if so, what did he experience? The silence that followed his last post was deafening. Determined to find answers, I reached out to the user who had mentioned the light bearer on the physics forum. To my surprise, they responded quickly. They claimed to have been a part of an online community that followed the light bearer's work closely. They pointed me to a private chat room where former followers still discussed his theories and experiments. Entering the chat room was like stepping into a different world. The members were a mix of scientists, enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists, each with their own take on what had happened. They shared documents, videos, and theories, trying to piece together the puzzle. One member, Quantum Seeker, shared an intriguing theory. They believed that the light bearer might have succeeded in his experiment, but had traveled so far into the future that no one was left to witness his return. According to them, if the light bearer had truly reached light speed, he could have traveled hundreds or even thousands of years into the future in what felt like an instant to him. Another member, Time Traveler 01, had a different take. They suggested that the light bearer might have created a rift in time and space, causing him to be trapped in a different dimension or timeline. This theory was supported by strange, distorted images that Time Traveler 01 claimed to have captured near the original lab's location. As fascinating as these theories were, they only added to the mystery. I felt like I was no closer to the truth than when I started. But one thing was clear. The light bearer's experiments, whether real or not, had left a lasting impact on those who had come across his work. I'll keep digging and see if I can find more concrete evidence or explanations. In the meantime, if any of you have any information or theories about this, please share. This mystery is far from solved, and I have a feeling there's much more to uncover. Hey Reddit, I'm back with more updates on the mysterious case of the Light Bearer. After delving into the theories and documents shared by the online community, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something hidden beneath the surface that we were all missing. So I decided to dig deeper. One evening, while combing through the archives of the private chat room, I stumbled upon a thread discussing an old interview with a physicist named Dr. Evelyn Carter. The members of the chat room believed she might have had some connection to the Light Bearer. Intrigued, I tracked down the interview, which was part of a forgotten science documentary series from the early 2000s. Dr. Carter spoke about her research in quantum mechanics and her interest in the theoretical possibilities of light-speed travel. What caught my attention was her mention of a young protege she had mentored, who was obsessed with pushing the boundaries of physics. She never named him, but the description matched what little I knew about the Light Bearer. Driven by a hunch, I decided to reach out to Dr. Carter. I found her contact information through her university's faculty page and sent her a carefully worded email, explaining my interest in her work and mentioning the Light Bearer without revealing too much. I didn't expect a reply, but to my surprise, she responded within a few days. Dr. Carter agreed to a video call. She was an older woman now, her hair gray but her eyes still sharp and intelligent. I asked her about her protege and his experiments. She was hesitant at first, but as our conversation went on, she opened up. She confirmed that she had mentored a brilliant young physicist who had been fascinated by the idea of light-speed travel. She described him as both a genius and a bit of a madman, someone who was willing to take enormous risks to prove his theories. She hadn't heard from him in years and had assumed he had abandoned his research after they lost contact. When I mentioned the dark website and the experiments documented there, she looked genuinely disturbed. She admitted that her protege had discussed building a machine capable of near light-speed travel, but she had always thought it was more of a thought experiment than a serious endeavor. She had no idea he had actually built it. Our conversation took a darker turn when I described the videos and the supposed time dilation effects. Dr. Carter explained that if the Light Bearer had indeed managed to travel at or near the speed of light, the consequences could be far more severe than just time dilation. She talked about the potential for severe biological and molecular damage, something she had always warned him about. She then mentioned something that sent chills down my spine. According to her, her protege had once hypothesized that traveling at light speed could potentially alter not just the traveler's perception of time, but also their physical and mental state. He theorized that the experience could be so overwhelming that it might drive someone to madness or worse. Dr. Carter advised me to stop my investigation, warning that some things were better left unknown, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know what had happened to the Light Bearer. Back in the chat room, I shared my findings with the community. Theories started flying. Some believed that the Light Bearer might have succeeded, but at a terrible cost. Others thought he might be trapped in some form of quantum limbo, unable to return. Then something unexpected happened. I received a private message from a user named Observer. They claimed to have been part of the original research team that worked with the Light Bearer and offered to share crucial information if I agreed to keep their identity secret. I agreed, and what they told me was both fascinating and terrifying. According to Observer, after the Light Bearer disappeared, strange things started happening around the lab. Equipment would malfunction without reason, and there were reports of eerie, almost ghostly phenomena. Some of the researchers claimed to see fleeting shadows or hear whispers in empty rooms. The most disturbing part was a series of encrypted files Observer sent me. They contained more videos and logs from the experiments, but these were different. The videos showed distorted, almost nightmarish scenes. In one, a mouse reappeared from the light-speed machine. but its movements were jerky and unnatural, as if it was caught between two states of being. The final log entry was from the light-bearer himself. It was a frantic, almost incoherent rant. He talked about seeing strange beings of light and shadow during his experiments, entities that existed beyond our understanding of time and space. He warned that his machine had opened a doorway to something unimaginable, and that if anyone else tried to follow his path, they might unleash horrors beyond comprehension. I sat back trying to process everything. Had the light-bearer truly succeeded in his quest, only to open a Pandora's box of cosmic horrors? Or was it all the delusions of a man driven to madness by his own genius? I don't have the answers yet, but I'm determined to find out. I'll continue my search and keep you all updated. If any of you have more information or theories, please share. This mystery is far from over. Hey Reddit, it's me again, back with more updates on the enigma of the light-bearer. After my chilling conversation with Dr. Carter and the unsettling files from Observer, I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but I still had so many questions. I decided to dig deeper into the encrypted files, hoping to find more clues. One of the files was a journal, meticulously kept by the light-bearer. It started innocuously enough, with notes on experiments, observations, and personal reflections. But as I read further, the entries became more erratic and desperate. In one of the earlier entries, he wrote about his excitement at the prospect of traveling at the speed of light. He was confident in his calculations and eager to test his theories. He described the construction of the machine in great detail, explaining how it utilized a combination of cutting-edge technology and theoretical physics to achieve near-light-speed travel. As the experiments progressed, his entries took on a darker tone. He wrote about the strange phenomena he began to observe, distortions in the fabric of space-time, and fleeting glimpses of entities that seemed to exist outside our perception of reality. He described them as beings of pure energy, neither benevolent nor malevolent, but utterly alien in nature. One entry stood out. It was dated just days before his final experiment. He wrote about a dream he had, or what he thought was a dream. In it, he found himself in a vast, empty void, surrounded by shimmering lights. The lights formed patterns, shapes that seemed to convey a message, but he couldn't decipher it. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread and woke up in a cold sweat. He wondered if his mind was being affected by the experiments, or if he was glimpsing something beyond human comprehension. In the days leading up to his final experiment, his entries became increasingly disjointed. He expressed doubt and fear, questioning whether he was on the brink of a monumental discovery or utter madness. The last entry was particularly haunting. He wrote that he felt like he was being watched, that the entities he had glimpsed were aware of him and his experiments. He ended the entry with a cryptic message: "If you find this, know that I did it for the pursuit of knowledge, but some doors should never be opened." I shared the journal entries with the chat room, and the response was overwhelming. Theories and speculations flew fast and furious. Some believed the light-bearer had indeed encountered interdimensional beings, while others thought his mind had simply fractured under the stress of his experiments. Then, out of nowhere, I received another message from Observer. They had found another set of files, hidden within the encrypted ones. These files were different. They contained surveillance footage from the lab, showing the moments leading up to the light-bearer's final experiment. The footage was grainy and the audio was barely audible, but it showed him making final adjustments to the machine. He looked exhausted but determined. He spoke to the camera, explaining his plan one last time. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of fear. As he activated the machine, the room was bathed in a blinding light. The camera struggled to adjust, and for a few moments, everything was washed out. Then, suddenly, the light dimmed and the machine powered down. The room was empty. The light-bearer was gone. The footage cut to several hours later. Other researchers entered the lab looking confused and alarmed. They inspected the machine, checking the data logs and calling out for the light bearer, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had simply vanished. I spent hours analyzing the footage, looking for any clues. And then I noticed something chilling. In the moments before the light dimmed, there was a brief flicker on the screen, almost like static. But when I slowed it down, I saw it was more than that. There were shapes within the flicker, shadows that moved with an eerie fluidity. It was almost as if the entities the light bearer had described were there watching. I shared this discovery with the chat room, and it sparked a frenzy of discussion. Some believed the entities had taken him, while others thought he had crossed over into their dimension. But one thing was clear: whatever had happened to him, it was beyond our current understanding of physics and reality. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of something monumental, but also deeply dangerous. Observer urged me to be cautious, warning that we might be dealing with forces beyond our control. I decided to take a step back and reassess everything. I reviewed all the data, the videos, the journal entries, and the theories. I reached out to a few more experts in quantum physics and theoretical science, hoping for some insight. Most of them dismissed the whole thing as a hoax, but a few expressed genuine interest and concern. One expert, Dr. Harlan, mentioned something intriguing. He said that if the light bearer had truly achieved light-speed travel, he might have created a ripple in the fabric of space-time, an anomaly that could have unforeseen consequences. He cautioned that such experiments could potentially disrupt the balance of our universe, leading to unpredictable and possibly catastrophic outcomes. I'm left with more questions than ever. Did the light bearer succeed in his experiment? Did he travel to another dimension or timeline? Are the entities real, or are they figments of a mind pushed to the brink? And most importantly, what are the implications of his work for the rest of us? I'll keep searching for answers and will update you all as I learn more. If any of you have any information or insights, please share. This mystery is far from over, and I fear we may only be scratching the surface. Hey Reddit, I'm back for what might be the final update on the mystery of the light bearer. After countless hours of research, discussions, and sleepless nights, I think I've finally uncovered the truth, or at least something close to it. This journey has been more than just a deep dive into conspiracy theories. It's been a mind-bending trip into the unknown. Following my last post, I received an unexpected email. It was from a former colleague of Dr. Carter who wished to remain anonymous. They claimed to have vital information about the light bearer and agreed to share it under the condition of anonymity. I agreed, hoping this would be the breakthrough I needed. The email contained a wealth of information, including a detailed report on the final days of the light bearer's experiments. According to the report, the team had indeed observed strange phenomena that they couldn't explain. Equipment would malfunction inexplicably, and some team members reported experiencing vivid, unsettling dreams, similar to those described in the light bearer's journal. But the most shocking revelation was a series of coordinates included in the email. The anonymous source claimed these coordinates led to the location of the original lab where the light bearer had conducted his experiments. The lab had been abandoned for years, but they believed it still held crucial evidence. Fueled by a mix of excitement and apprehension, I decided to visit the lab. I know it sounds reckless, but I had to see it for myself. I took every precaution, making sure someone knew where I was going and when to expect me back. The lab was located in a remote area, far from any major cities. As I approached, I could see the dilapidated building looming in the distance, its windows dark and broken. It looked like something out of a horror movie, but I pressed on. Inside, the lab was a time capsule from the past. Dust-covered equipment was strewn about, and papers were scattered everywhere. It was clear that whoever had left hadn't taken the time to clean up. I carefully navigated the clutter, looking for anything that might provide answers. In a back room, I found what I was looking for, a series of notebooks and a dusty old computer. The notebooks contained more of the light bearer's notes, filled with equations, observations, and sketches of the machine. But what caught my eye was a notebook labeled Final Experiment. In it, he detailed his last moments before stepping into the machine. He wrote about his fears and hopes, but also about something else, a contingency plan. He had set the machine to record data even after his departure, hoping it would capture whatever happened to him. The old computer was surprisingly still operational. I powered it up, and after a few minutes of navigating through outdated software, I found the data logs. They were extensive, documenting every second of the final experiment. The data confirmed what we had suspected. The light bearer had indeed achieved near light speed travel. The logs showed the exact moment he activated the machine, the surge in energy, and then the anomaly. The machine recorded a massive spike in energy, followed by a sudden drop, as if something had absorbed it. But there was more. The logs also contained video footage from inside the machine. I hesitated for a moment, then hit play. The footage showed the light bearer inside the chamber, bathed in a bright light. As the machine activated, the light intensified and the image distorted. For a brief moment, shapes and shadows appeared around him, similar to the entities described in the journal. Then in an instant, he was gone. The video cut off and the data logs ended. I sat back trying to process everything. Had he succeeded? Had he traveled to another dimension or time? The evidence seemed to suggest so, but without him to confirm it, we might never know. I returned home, my mind racing with possibilities. I shared my findings with the chat room, and the reaction was a mix of awe and fear. Some were convinced we had uncovered the truth, while others remained skeptical, calling for more concrete evidence. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that some mysteries might never be fully solved. The light bearer might have achieved something extraordinary, or he might have been lost to his own ambitions. Whatever the case, his story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pushing the boundaries of science without fully understanding the consequences. I want to thank everyone who followed this journey with me, contributed theories, and provided support. It's been a wild ride, and while I don't have all the answers, I feel like we've come closer to understanding the enigma of the light bearer. If I discover anything new, I'll be sure to update you all, but for now I think it's time to step back and let this mystery rest.